Okay, now, Power Rangers just recently came out last week, and I saw it today, and I gotta say, that was actually the most amazing thing I've seen in years now. It actually like lived up to my expectation, and not to mention, Power Rangers is actually my childhood, and it's actually the reason how I got into superheroes like Spider-Man, Batman. Heck, it even got me into superhero teams like Avengers and Justice League in the first place. Anyway, what I loved about the movie was the actions, the character development, and the retconning of the Power Rangers lore in the first place. Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that the adaptation to the franchise was actually pretty well made and the action was good. The expectation I didn't get though was that it didn't have much fight scenes in the movie in favor of character development, but that's not a bad thing though. I'm just hoping that it would have had more in it. So anyways, the movie starts off like in the beginning where Zordon was actually a Red Ranger and so was Rita Repulsa. And you know what? That's actually pretty interesting to be honest. The fact that both Zordon and Rita used to be Rangers at some point in the past. And I honestly hope they somewhere like in the next movie and beyond they end up touching upon that. And one thing that's good to know is the fact that all the characters, unlike in the original, who were like one-note goody goods, like in this movie, they actually have flaws, like like us human beings. Jason, he was a famous like star quarterback in high school, but he broke into the school and brought a cow there, and now he's on home arrest. Billy is autistic and gets picked on a lot because of it. Trini, she's abnormal. She's something I never knew until now, that she's bi but doesn't want her family to know about it. Kimberly is a jerk to this one guy because she ended up like socking him in the mouth just because of her best friend sending her a photo of him, and she ended up like sending it to the entire school, and the guy found out, and so she socked him in the mouth for it. And Zach, the Black Ranger, who in this film's universe is Asian, he lives in a mobile home with a sick mother, and he has to take care of her, and he acts up the way he does because he's mostly scared that any breath she take will be her last. And then you got Alpha 5, who in this movie, he kicks ass too. Even if, like when he first sees the Rangers, he's able to drag him to the command center with no effort, which is pretty funny too, pretty interesting because in the original he was like a comic relief android, and he was like more like the guy he was more like the information sort of guy. And then I think my favorite, and then like in the middle of the movie, meanwhile you have Rita Repulsa, who wakes up from her chronic sleep, found in the ocean, and she ends up killing one of the cops too, who found her body. And she's collecting gold to create Goldar, which is kind of strange because Goldar in the original was like a second in command to Rita Repulsa, and he will occasionally fight the Rangers when they have no choice. However, in this movie universe, Goldar was created as an artificial monster for Rita. And then there's the Putties, which is like the Rangers like mooks they fight in the original, and their designs are different like everyone else like every Ranger in the universe. Like how the Putties in the original, they were like these humanoid android sort of things. How in this movie universe, they're like they're basically rock golems, and I don't mind those since this is a different movie. And then we get to the part in the movie where this interesting part in the movie where they go through this character development at like in the camping when they finally start bonding and introducing themselves. That's when it's just when the characters start like telling us and showing us their flaws, like I mentioned earlier. And my favorite scene in the movie in the beginning when Jason ends up going to detention was when this bully, I forgot his name though, Duncan I think it was. Nah, it was when Jason slapped the mess out, was when he slapped the shit out of him in the beginning for picking on Billy. I mean, the fact that he slapped him right in the face though, and the fact that the bully like, he was even scared to do anything about it too, knowing that he would get messed up if he messed with Billy again. And then after they get their powers, Billy like gets headbutted by him, and of course, it ends up nearly breaking his face too. And I don't know why, but them finding their powers almost for some reason with them finding the Zeo crystals almost reminded me of Chronicles when Andrew and his friend and cousin went into the cave and went to the catacombs to go get their powers, but it ends up collapsing on them. But in Power Rangers, despite this being somewhat of a dark reboot, it still has some moments of cheesiness from the original too, which is something I like though. And then by the middle of the movie is when we get to the training montage. The Rangers are of course not doing their best because, they're still teenagers with attitudes, like in the original. And of course you have them occasionally butting head with each other, and even Zordon too. Like how when Zach and Jason, how they started fighting each other, and then Billy ends up breaking the fight up, which at that point he briefly ended up morphing too. And let's get to the morphing part. One thing I noticed about the morphing is how the morphing kind of works like Tony getting his suit. How the suits like ends up materializing in them. Kind of different from how like in the original Power Rangers, they usually have like a coins to help morph them. And then Rita Repulsa, I actually like how in this movie she's actually more of a threat than she was in the original. She was just like way too hammy for her to be taken serious in the original. How Lord Zed, he was a bigger threat to Rita, despite him being despite having to tone him down to be goofy, because back then when Power Ranger was out and Lord Zed was introduced, he was freaking scary to kids. So scary, in fact, that some kids would end up crying as soon as he appeared on screen. And so the parents wanted Saban to tone him down to being goofy like Rita Repulsa. That's kind of a letdown too, since how in this movie Rita Repulsa, she was kind of like Lord Zed minus the goofiness at times too. She was like a mixture of Enchantress and Loki given her personality. And the fact that she goes to Krispy Kreme's Donut Dirty Destruction to get some donuts. I don't know why, but I couldn't even take it serious though because it just looks silly. But I don't mind though because it still keep up with the campiness of the original Rangers. And one thing to note about it is the fact that the freaking theme song from the 1995 movie of Power Rangers played when they wrote the Zords too. Honestly, when I saw that part, I nearly shit bricks though because it was like my childhood's coming back to me just seeing that play. And by the ending of the movie, the ending credits, Tommy Oliver was teased too with his Letterman jacket being shown, and the detention staff was saying his name. And I've been hearing often that the cast want the Green Ranger to be female by the next movie, but I'm not sure about that. I mean, I don't mind though. It's just as long as it's an entirely different character. Since Tommy Oliver is the reason how us kids ended up getting into Power Rangers in the first place. He was the star of the franchise too. Not to mention he's basically the Wolverine of Power Rangers, given his popularity. So trying to make him female will just throw me off a bit too because, forget that anyway. It's just the fact that trying to make him female though, at least make it a completely different character. Don't just replace Tommy. Don't replace the homie Tommy off like that. And also, one thing to note is the fact that Jason David Frank, the guy who played Tommy in the original, apparently him and Amy, who played Kimberly in the original Mighty Morphin series, I heard they apparently made a cameo in the series, in the movie, in the crowd. But honestly, I didn't even notice that though. And I also loved how. I also kind of liked how. I also love the fact that the original cast from the original Mighty Morphin series actually got together for the red carpet to go see the movie. That's actually kind of beautiful though. It's kind of a shame that Thuy Trang, who played Trini in the first Rangers, she passed away in a car crash like back in 2001. Kind of a shame she wouldn't be there though. She'd be proud though. Also, I think my flaw with the movie is a complete lack is the lack of fight scenes in general though, which is what sold the Rangers though too. I want to see more of it though because the fight scenes were my favorite though, and the biggest pros too is the fact that it doesn't use stock footage from other Sentai series like the original Rangers did, but they only did that because they needed more money in the budget. So the fact that the movie didn't even use Sentai footage or any stock footage from that is pretty amazing too. And what I'm hoping for the next sequel is what I'm hoping for the next series, well, the next movie is when they make the Green Ranger the villain, just like how he was in the original show before he ended up becoming the good guy. And speaking of the Green Ranger, I'm also wondering if they're gonna introduce the Zeo Rangers in the next movie too, like by the ending, since the series is still ongoing. I'm still also hoping that even the White Ranger will make an appearance too in the next movie because I don't know. And if anyone should play the Green, and if any villain who should be in the next movie, it should probably be Mascock from Dino Thunder or Lord Zed. And who should play Lord Zed? Honestly, I would have said Hugh Jackman though, but he would have felt out of place though. So I'm gonna have somebody else play Lord Zed though. But honestly, I'm not sure who should play him. Maybe Jason David Frank, the guy who played Tommy Oliver. I don't know. That would have been so meta though, just like how Bryan Cranston played some of the villains in Mighty Morphin, and now he's playing Zordon. And speaking of Zordon, the fact that him and Rita were Rangers at one point was pretty interesting. And Rita's like morphine costume, it looks more parasitic too when you think about it. And as for the Ranger's costume in the movie, I kind of like his redesign though. It kind of gives me a Judge Dredd kind of vibe from it. And also the Zords they ride in, it seems symbiotic too. Like when they get in, since it kind of connects to their back too when they have to ride it. Kind of find it interesting too. And Rita's suits too. When she transforms, for some reason it kind of looks like. It also looks like sort of parasitic, like a dryad kind of transformation. And then my biggest pros in the movie is the fact that it's also the fact that they made the movie dark and rebooted though, and yet they still kept it optimistic at the same time too, because just a just a grimdark for the sake of grimdark would have made the movie somewhat sappy and unhappy to watch and unwatchable. But the fact that it still keeps with the spirit of the Power Rangers is why I love the movie so much. Oh, and spoilers, Billy died briefly in the movie though, but yet they ended up bringing him back though, like 3 minutes in later. But sometimes I always imagine what would have been like had they kept him dead. I think that would have been interesting to be honest, if they kept Billy dead though, and probably had somebody else replace him though, like during the movie. But I'm not sure who would have been a perfect candidate to replace Billy if he were to stay dead. And then you have let's see. Then you have Zordon, who like I said was a Red Ranger. Also, how I would love to see like by the next movie they like explore the Alien Ranger sort of thing, like was Zordon like the first generation of the Power Rangers, and why did Rita Repulsa betray them? Like was it because like she became prideful and like it took over her mind or something like that, or the fact that pride pretty much got to her at some point that she ended up killing the other Rangers. And also, as for teenagers with attitude, at least the actors that played them look like teenagers though, so there's that. What else to say about Power Rangers? I'll give this a 9/10 because if anything, if you're a fan of the Power Rangers, you should see it. And not to mention, if you enjoy the spirit of watching people in jumpsuits just fighting others, you should watch it. If you just like watching stuntsmen in pajamas fighting other guys in pajamas, just enjoy the movie. Just enjoy the Power Rangers series because Like I said though, the campiness is still present in the movie though. It's just not prevalent though, because it seems more grounded, like an origin story. So keep in mind that once you get to it, don't expect too much fighting in it, because like I said though, it wants to focus more on character development, since the guy who directed the movie, from what I hear, he's a big fan of coming of age stories. So save the fighting by the end of the movie, because you're gonna enjoy the ride so far. That's it.